Talofa lava, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susana Suisuiki. Coming up, the price of flights from Samoa set to hike. Also, 2 international summits seek to strengthen ties with the region. And a new direction for Fiji's opposition leader ahead of elections. A round trip by air from Samoa is about to become more expensive as the government rolls out new airport fees. It includes a $47 increase in Samoa's departure tax and a $58 levy for a new aerodrome facility for all passengers aged over 12. Our reporter Kaya Selby, who's following the story, joins me to talk more about this. Talofa lava, Kaya, what does this mean for passengers?
Kia ora, Sana. Quite simply, it means that ticket prices are going up across the board for all flights out of Samoa. That's to the tune of about $63 or about 180 tala, or in New Zealand dollars, it's going to be about 100. These are costs that the Samoa Airport Authority, which governs the international airport in Apia, are raising to recover major infrastructure development costs over the last few years. Or as my Samoan editor said, it's the cost of a fancy airport. The breakdown is a departure tax increase and a special levy for an aerodrome, and they'll come into effect around March the 1st. And keep in mind also that these only apply for passengers under the age of 12. So if there's ever a time to lie about your age, I suppose this is it.
Which airlines will bear the brunt of this the most?
That's going to depend on the number of passengers carried by a certain airline out of Samoa. In this case, we can assume it'll be Air New Zealand. We, Aotearoa, provide about 51% of all visitors to the country last year. Air New Zealand carried about 42% of all visitors to Samoa last December. That's based on the most recently available statistics. Remember, it's not a levy on the ticket to Samoa, it's a levy from Samoa, right? So that will impact your returning tourists, your Samoan nationals visiting family, your seasonal migrant workers. Air New Zealand declined to comment for our story. They referred us to the International Aviation Authority, for which they are a member, who said that they are gravely concerned. They would urge the Samoan government to reconsider. So you can absolutely assume they'll be concerned. But another interesting point here, Air New Zealand are about to face competition from Qantas, who are set to begin Auckland to Apia direct flights in June. So that'll eat into Air New Zealand's market share. But whether these airport charges are going to impact Qantas's decisions, I guess we'll have to wait and see.
And what are Samoans saying about this?
They're not happy. Yeah, that much we can tell from the Facebook posts. I've dug through a few comments, and these are some of my favourites. These ridiculously increased prices should have been discussed properly instead of being rushed through. Travellers should be given ample time to prepare. Another commenter said, I usually come every year with a family of 12, but no more. Another said, what kind of government do we have giving out millions and trying to hang us with this fee? That's not a godly way of doing things. People aren't happy. A lot of people are confused what it means for tickets booked after March the 1st. Are they going to have additional costs to pay later? Whether it's on top of already existing costs. All questions so far unanswered by the Samoan Airport Authority or in fact the government. So we're waiting for answers on those.
2 international summits underway this week are seeking to strengthen ties that Pacific Island nations have with Japan and the US. In the case of the Japan-Pacific Islands Defence Dialogue, it's a semi-regular summit. In the case of the Investment, Security and Shared Prosperity Summit, it's a new initiative with an investor focus. Johnny Blades has been looking at these summits and joins me now. Kia ora, Johnny. Firstly, what's the deal with the meeting Japan is hosting?
Officials from 14 Pacific Island nations are in Tokyo for this event. It's the third Japan-Pacific Islands Defence Dialogue. It's a 3-day event. It also features a number of Southeast Asian nations, but very much a focus on the Pacific. Japan's been holding these talks for a few years now and kind of sees itself as an important regional player in the Pacific. And you know, the summit is touted as aiming to, quote, strengthen coordination with the island nations, obviously through defence cooperation. And Japan's Defence Minister Shinjiro Koizumi is due to hold a series of bilateral talks with his counterparts from Tonga, Fiji and Papua New Guinea. Those are the Pacific nations who are there, which have military forces.
And what about this US summit? What's it about? Is it a sign that the US is getting interested in the Pacific again?
Yeah, well, it seems so. After a bit of a gap when, it was criticised for sort of not engaging much with the Pacific. So this week in Hawaii, the US, together with the Pacific Islands Development Program, which is based in Honolulu, are hosting Pacific Island countries at the Investment Security and Shared Prosperity Summit, bringing together, leaders and officials from the US and Pacific countries and New Zealand as well, but private sector investors to sort of discuss reducing barriers to investment, I guess, and quote, connecting capital with opportunities across the Pacific. What I think is interesting about this summit is that, there's a lot of interest in critical minerals and, seabed minerals. I think it's notable that the Pacific Islands Development Program based there in Honolulu, they've got a new director now, and that is the former Cook Islands Prime Minister Henry Puna, who just took over in the recent days in time for this summit. His government and the Cooks, when he was in power, and the current government and the Cooks, led by Mark Brown, they've been pretty interested in deep sea mining, and it's a bit of a controversial issue, as you've covered in Waves before. But, people aren't all that happy about the push for allowing mining activities to take place in the sea, in the Pacific. But there is a lot of interest among some governments, and, the US is really interested in it, as we've heard Donald Trump, he's been talking about wanting to get access to critical minerals and rare earth minerals. It's a big focus for his government. And, it seems no coincidence that just this month, the Cook Islands government signed an agreement with the US to strengthen supply chains for critical minerals and rare earth minerals, and that includes cooperation relating to deep-sea minerals.
Is that really the main reason why they're holding the summit then?
Yeah, I think it's likely a very big factor. The US wants to close the gap that China has on it in terms of access and production of critical minerals and rare earth minerals. And the US knows there are, as we were just saying, a number of governments in the region who are interested at looking at the opportunities for revenue that deep-sea mining may hold. And I note that from the New Zealand government's point of view, they've sent Casey Costello, the Customs Minister, whose political party, New Zealand First, the party of Winston Peters, they've been very vocal about how deep-sea mining and the opportunities of resources that are in the sea hold for countries should be exploited. They're really into pushing for mining. So I think that's a sign that from the US point of view, all roads lead to China. They don't want China to have any advantage over it. And in a way, the China factor is also looming large over the summit happening in Tokyo as well, because Japan wanting to firm up these ties with Pacific Island nations in the area of defence, that really is always about a counterbalance to whatever influence it perceives China to be having in the Pacific. So it always comes down to geopolitics.
Fiji's opposition leader tried to get support from convicted former Prime Minister Frank Bainimarama to contest the next election. Inia Seruiratu said he wanted his new party, People First, to remain united with the deregistered Fiji First Party. Margot Staunton has more.
The opposition leader told Pacific Waves that the former military chief did not back the idea. Mr Seruiratu, a former Fiji First MP, has since cut ties with Mr Bainimarama and rebranded the defunct party under the name of People First.
It's the legacy that was part of Fiji First. We wanted to continue with that, and it would be good if we remain united, and that is what we wanted. But unfortunately, that did not happen.
The former Prime Minister was given a 12-month suspended prison sentence by the Fiji High Court in Suva last October on a corruption charge. In a separate case, he was jailed in May 2024 for perverting the course of justice in a case related to him blocking an investigation at the University of the South Pacific. He was released from prison 6 months into his 1-year sentence. Mr Serui Ratu added that People First was not, however, dependent on Mr Bainimarama's support.
It's unfortunate that we cannot be together. And I've stated very clearly we have cut ties with them totally, and we just have to carry on with the work.
Franklin Bainimarama seized power in a military coup in 2006. He deposed the democratically elected Prime Minister Laisenia Ngarase and took on the job in 2007. However, Fiji returned to democracy 8 years later. Mr Bainimarama's Fiji First Party swept to victory in 2014, the first general election in 8 years. But the party was viewed as being dictatorial due to the bullying and intimidation of opponents, flouting of human rights and suppression of the media. Mr Serui Ratu has defended Fiji First and pointed out its achievements.
How do you define that dictatorship? Fiji First won 2 consecutive elections. Fiji First did a lot for Fiji in terms of raising the living standards in state of the economy and, of course, our regional and international connections.
He said that while People First is in its infancy, it is pro-multiracialism, secularism and women in politics. He said half of its candidates will be women, and it will build on Fiji First's support in the West and with Indo-Fijians.
We have to rebrand, not only as former Fiji First politicians, but of course the opposition as well. The opposition plays a very key role in democratic governance. But unfortunately, there's a lot of animosity, a lot of party politics.
He admits People First has no manifesto and a lot of work to do.
It is about Fiji. We will one day finish, but what is it that we leave behind for our children? We need to create a better place for Fijians, not only for a few.
Fiji is expected to head to the polls any time between 7th of August this year and 7th of February in 2027. 8 political parties have registered to contest the general elections so far. They are the ruling People's Alliance Party, or PAP, the Social Democratic Liberal Party, or SODELPA, the All People's Party, We Unite Fiji Party, the Fiji Labour Party, the National Federation Party, Unity Fiji, and People First.
A long-standing mural of David Bowie in downtown Wellington has been replaced with one paying tribute to legendary musician and Fat Freddy's Drop band member Chris Faiumu, or Mu, who died last year. The mural, which was painted over the course of about 4 days by street artists Owen Dippy and Otis Frizzell, was completed yesterday. RNZ's Morning Report Crystal Gibbons has more.
On the exterior wall of the Jam Hair Company building in Ghuznee Street, where once stood the mural of English music legend David Bowie, there now stands a tribute to a local legend. Chris Faiumu, who is known as DJ Mu or Fiji, used an MPC sampler which provided the backbone to many of Fat Freddy's songs. Mark Williams from Fat Freddy's Drop, otherwise known as MC Slave, says the mural hits the right tone.
We thought it was a suitable, appropriate and a great thing to honour Mu by doing a mural of him, and of course doing it in his hometown of Wellington, in the streets where he basically started his musical journey, seemed really appropriate.
He says the mural was a real labour of love, with supplies donated by friends, family and the wider community, while the artists donated their time. And passers-by are also taking the time to reminisce.
They come down, share stories, and I remember I was at that gig. They all come out, and it's really good. People have just been really, 99.9% have been absolutely, sort of gobsmacked actually by the war, but also just touched by it, I think.
One side of the mural features an almost photographic-looking portrait of Mu. The other side, which was painted by Otis Frizzell, brings in other elements of the band.
So it's kind of like start to, I would say, introduce Freddie's graphic language into it, that Freddie's lore, which is Noodles the Octopus, The Boys in the Boats, of course based on a true story. The first album that we're celebrating 21 years, it's BOATS, so it's boats. The Boys are in the boat. Moo's name up there is done in the same font that another artist, Sparrow Phillips, used on the first album for their kind of Fat Freddy's Drops logo.
He hadn't originally planned to pick up a paintbrush. He started out as an ideas guy for Owen Dippy's art.
We were thinking of things to do and I was just sort of contributing ideas, and it just got to the point where I had contributed so many ideas, Owen just didn't think that it was right or he had time to do everything that I'd suggested that we'd worked into the design. So he was like, well, I guess you should just come down to Wellington. So 3 days later, I was on a plane.
So what would Mew think of having his face up there?
Probably stoked and slightly sheepishly embarrassed. You know what I mean? He'd be like, oh, what do you want a picture of me for, you know? He's a pretty humble guy. But of course, if this was Dallas or one of the other members of the band, Mew would be like, oh, that's awesome, bro. But if it was him, he'd sort of be like, I don't want to be up there, but you know, we can't ask him, we're just going to have to assume he loves it.
Now the mural is completed, both Mark Williams and Otis Frazell would like to see someone, like the council, help graffiti guard it.
That's Pacific Waves for today. For all episodes, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, tō whā, soifua.